Come in, peoples. Come in, come in. Calling all the new dimensional healers into the space. My bright light brings all the healers to the yard. Welcome. Come in, come in. Thanks for showing up. Thanks, Kesha. How you doing? Sending you love today. It's good to see you around more. So, hello, Ali Victoria. Welcome. Come in. Sunshine Blue 92. Thanks for joining. I am going to hang out just for a little bit this evening, but felt a real call to come on and talk about a few things. So as people are filtering in, I'm going to invite you to just take a few breaths and ground. The stuff I'm going to be talking about might be a little activating. And so we want to make sure that we're running our energy all the way through and out the feet into the energetic body of the earth. So just ground yourselves for a few breaths. I'm going to build a little bit of a shared extra buffer around all of us in this bubble of the eternal now. Very nice. Yes, life has been feeling very surreal, hasn't it? There is a lot of interdimensional work happening in the earth plane right now. And we are being, as of like the last 48 hours, we are being blasted with a completely different level, like level, intensity, quantity of light than we ever have been before. And a lot of our physical upgrading that has been happening over the last over a year, a lot of those codes and tunings have been simply to allow us to physically handle and thrive in this level of intense light, which also means that kind of blasting we're going to soon see. The counterbalance to that, right? When we get blasted with pure light, then it shakes loose the muck and brings it up to the top. Hello, come on in, everyone. So I'm just encouraging everyone who's landing. Yes, tacos for life. Everyone who's just landing, I'm going to be talking about some stuff here in just a moment that can be a little activating. We want to make sure that we're all running our energy all the way through, out the feet, not contracting. So just take some breaths and start bringing your awareness through the central column and through your whole system. That way you stay grounded and are able to fully absorb all of the energies and transmissions. Okay, so this is actually related. Illusion, truth, light. You're asking, do you recommend there's anything we can do to help during this process? Everything I just said is what we all want to be doing in general during this process. And it sounds very simple and almost like, it's almost a throwaway thing. It is those foundational, basic, energetic hygiene, energetic health pieces that we need to really root in now. We need to do them to the point that they are completely second nature. If you are not at that point with these practices, you are one of the people who ought to be doing this. And I am often a little softer with my prescription, but this applies to everyone. All right, so things I want to share here. So I titled this, I believe, New Dimension Channeling. Why does Spirit want me to talk about this right now? I don't know. Let's see. Spirit's so funny. Spirit's like, it doesn't matter why it's meant to be in this moment, and so do it. I'm like, okay. So, new dimension channeling. This is this is everything that I talk about and that I do, right? It is the next evolution of the group of practices we used to call channeling, and so much more. And really, what we're talking about is a way of being. Because new dimension channeling, yes, you can do it in a focused, turning it on, turning it off kind of way. Like, I'm not always, in my fullest expansive channel mode in day-to-day life. But what I am doing is working my physical and energetic technologies as a way of being, as a way of humaning, as a way of navigating this 3D reality in the grocery store, at the bank, cleaning up my kids' vomit, all of it. Channeling throughout that whole way, because we're used to thinking of channeling in the old paradigm way, in which it was really this sort of discrete communication technology or practice, right? It's a way of transmitting information, receiving information from one dimension into another. And it is that too. But within the new dimension experience, especially for those of us who are healers, we are built, we are intended, our lives are designed to open and flourish when we tap into this other way that we are built versus the average human being and the way humans have been mostly built for millennia. We are built to be open portals all the time. And a lot of our discomfort, our confusion, self-doubt, codependent relationships, issues with food, all kinds of things. I mean, I almost want to go on for like 5 minutes just listing things. All of these things come back to resisting our physical design. Hear me on this. The vast majority of struggling that is happening in everyone's life who is listening to this right now, the vast majority of that struggling is because you're fighting your design. You are not built like an average human being. You know this. You've always known this. It goes beyond what most people are consciously holding. Way beyond. So new dimension channeling can take many different forms. But ultimately its goal, and this is something I am still very actively deepening in, its goal ultimately is to not be in any sort of separation at any point. Even the direct voice channeling that I do is still a little old paradigm. It's really training wheels for my ego because I feel often uncomfortable speaking as the fully blended God self as Kristin. And that's part of my personal work that I'm working with. But within the new dimension, that's what we're all doing. Because remember, old paradigm is the game of God pretending to be not God. And all the experiences and discoveries that come with that constraint. The new dimension, new earth, the game that all of us are playing on this lifetime run, that functions as the game of God pretending to be not God, remembering it is God, and then getting to experience all of this from that God lens. When I talk about new dimension channeling, what I'm talking about is a fully embodied, super aware, so self-reflexive, experience of channeling yourself into every part and every moment of your life, living energy first and learning how to navigate your discernment, your intuitive guidance, your co-creation with the physical world from the truth that you are a limitless, amazing, energetic creator being. And even this 3D material flesh world is subject to your command, essentially. It's really what it comes down to in the end. And your ability to slip into that state, right? Because the new dimension is not built to be hard. You're not supposed to prove yourself to getting in or acquiring things. You can just slip into this expansive, rooted, actualized way of being. And the great thing about new dimension channeling is that it both offers its own fruits, the guidance, the fun, the discovery, the occupation in your life, etc. It can be all of those things. And the process of doing it, bringing those energies through, grounding yourself and learning to work with the nuances of energy in that way, teaches and reprograms the remembering into you unto it. Oops. I don't know where that paused there, but I'm saying that the process itself is the spiritual practice also. It tunes while also revealing. Okay, I'm going to see what's happening up here. Okay. Hello, Trisha and Lauren. Is this the same, similar as being in a flow state? Yes, it is similar. I would say flow state, what most of us experience as a flow state, is the closest that we have to this sort of unified experience. So imagine the sort of extreme levels of flow state. If you've ever had flow state where you're also able to sort of anticipate reality or make will things into being, circumstances or information. When you weave that into flow state, that's it's very close to what I'm talking about. It's essentially that combination of things. But it's very expansive because when you are in flow, you are still anchored within the confines of the ego consciousness more. And you don't usually have access to all information. When you are in a channeling state, you have access to a much wider range of information across all space, time, and dimension. It is becoming conscious of your vast energetic self, and that carries with it, to different extents, different people, a lot of memory. And you're able to access memory or things from other timelines, things like that. And you may not consciously realize that's what's happening. It's not like, oh, I'm going to, 4 timelines over and grabbing this skill. But you'll definitely notice this flow of knowing and tapping into different veins of energy than you are used to in your day-to-day life, even in a flow state. But flow is the entry point. This really resonates. Fighting and hiding from it. And I feel like that's something that's probably resonating for many people. And it's something that is up this year. There are a lot of us that in one way or another, somewhere in our life, are confronting that part of ourselves. And there's just so much light now. There's a very little place to hide in shadow. And we're just settling our egos into that. And it's a good time to bring extra support and awareness to that happening in your system. Yeah. Notice it. Ask for help when you need it. Move slowly and sustainably. It's all about sustainable awakening, y'all. It really is. There's no rush. There's nowhere to get to. There's no one to become. There's nothing to do. Be in joy. Prime directive. Hola, Claudia. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, oh, wait, it just popped away. Where do you go to, my lovely? Where did it go? Yes. This is the most scary part to accept. Letting go of the grind and working long hours. Yeah, this is something that I am actively working through myself right now. And I think it's up for a lot of us. It's part and parcel, right, with stepping into purpose work and stepping into the personal design that we all carry, which is to live our lives in one way or another, a little off from center, sometimes a lot off from center, to help build new blueprints in this world of how to be. For us, there are these ways of being that we're driven to or don't seem so scary compared to the average person. So we're the forerunners. We'll do it, and then people after us will be like, oh, look, there's an actual example of how to do this more. There's this whole wave of people. But within, I am always drawn to putting these things into historical and cultural context. And the work piece is one place I think this is really powerful. This idea of living to work is, it's not exclusively American, but it is excruciatingly American. And it was not always this way. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, the economy functioned in a way, culture functioned in a way where there was a little bit more of work-life balance. There were a lot of other things that fucking blew. But that piece did exist to a certain extent for some groups of people. It has become almost a moral weakness within late capitalism to not be grinding every moment possible. And I don't know where you are falling in the generational strata, but certainly for later Gen X and all of millennials, there is this really interesting push-pull relationship with the results of the Protestant work ethic. This sort of like, you have a moral obligation to be earning your existence in the world. And it's easy within the American collective to get sucked into that and think that that's how the whole world functions and sees things. And it is not. Massive chunks of this planet think we are crazy and self-destructive because of the relationship we have to work. But trading in hours for dollars doesn't actually make any sense at all in many ways, particularly within the cultures we are living in now. It's so antiquated. It's ridiculous. And that anxiety that you're doing it wrong, that you will be less safe, that people will judge you. There's so many different strands there. If you choose to do it differently, if you choose to put down the yoke, put the plow down, and do it differently, do it in a more aligned, nourishing, humanity first kind of way. The expectations of the average American workplace at this point are inhuman. They are degrading. Little things that we take for granted too, you know, like having to get permission to go to the bathroom Millions of people have to do that as a part of their adult job. I'm getting a little worked up. This is something that I really like. There are a few things that really bring out violence in me. Certain economic things really get to me. And I say this as someone who has lived a relatively privileged life to a certain extent. Ups and downs, different ways. But coming back to center, this is the time. This is important. This isn't just, oh, this is more comfortable and facilitates my lifestyle. It's actually important. It is revolutionary for us to say, no, this doesn't work, and I will not play along with this exploitative system anymore. I'm going to find the bridge structures into the most aligned structures where your needs are being met, your wants are being met. You are feeling held, safe, and abundant, and you're including time in that. So often we just don't include our personal time, the hours of our existence on this planet, into the calculus of value. The various systems we're feeding into certainly understand that value. And turns out, this is one I am reminding myself of, and Spirit is showing me every single day. Turns out, when we stop contracting and draining ourselves and forcing ourselves to do things that make us feel kind of dead or exploited or just run down, when we stop that, the whole beautiful multidimensional system we're built with opens up and the flow comes through. And you are more easily guided into higher and higher alignments, which brings more flow and abundance and connection and creative structures. That's one thing that has been really eye-opening for me as I've been stepping into this different form of living, is as creative as I am, and I'm like off the charts creative as far as like scientific measurement. I love finding the totally bizarre mishmash of disparate things and finding the harmony in them and creating. But I am ever just delighted and in awe, mind blown, to see how many different ways there are to be supported in this world, right? Like, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is Muggle Financial Central number 2, basically. And there is a world that already exists outside of these strict structures of exchanges of dollars. There are a lot of other things that have value, create value, that are meaningful and also help our normative life structures to continue moving. And Spirit is wanting lots of opportunity to blossom in that way on the earth plane right now and over the next 50 years. That's kind of one of the things that's really just starting to open up and was really sparked with the pandemic, is reigniting human ingenuity around how to have our needs met and live in more balance. It's still the same amount of resource and energy that's moving and snaking around. We're just learning how to pull it out of these really strict linear structures, hierarchical structures, and start moving it in this more organic way. So ever move with alignment and guidance. I'm never one to say just like burn it all down and trust it'll regrow itself the next day. But returning to all of these things that I've just said, and I'll post this on my YouTube, the replay of this, if you guys want to go back and re-explore. But the giving yourself the space to let the ego soften and understand how it is actually safe in letting go of those structures and having compassion for that. It's a big work this year as we're all getting guided into our more aligned purpose work. It's a scary thing for the ego. But almost everything that we have been sold about money and financial life and resource within the American collective and those that are really directly tied to us culturally, like the vast majority of it is obsolete, was never true to begin with, or is overtly trying to mess with us. Like straight up, not even trying to hide it. So that's something to hold, right? As you're sitting with all of these things, as we're all sitting with these different pieces of our lives and trying to tie this like ethereal, astral stuff with like concrete, how do I pay rent life. And I think it's good to revisit this more sort of bird eye view of what's happening and why we're having the urges we're having. Okay, thanks for the roses, y'all. Roses flowing in. Victoria, I do not know what to call channeling anymore. I know, right? That's like the thing I keep coming back to working on this workshop. I'm like, this language feels not quite right, but it's what we have right now, and we'll fine tune it as we go here over the next year or two. But it's everything. That's the thing too. It's one of those places where it highlights the difference between us and the sort of average human population. Is we are built to have this be an inherent part of us all the time. And for the average human, it's a more rare thing. It has to be trained, or you have to be born with certain gifts and all of that. And like, we're just all built to do this in one way or another. It looks different for each one of us. And some of us are more open than others. But it's also the time of letting go of categories and labels and going towards the energy and the knowing. And that's what a lot, for those of you who are signed up for my workshop on Saturday, that's a lot of what we're doing as new dimensional healers and returning to these practices. It is a returning for every single one of you. It's a returning. You are remembering what you already know and what you have tuned into the larger human ego structure you're working from over several lifetimes, most of you. It's just about bringing the little awarenesses back in that let it open up. Because in so many ways, this reality has programmed confusing labels onto things that are very obvious and simple. So we don't even realize that we're doing it all the time because society has told us, oh no, that's not energy, that's you being cold. Things like that. I love that you guys are supporting each other. So there's still a few spots left for my workshop on Saturday, and we're going to have replays and everything for you to continue deepening with the teachings afterward, or if you can't make it in real time, or some have to leave early to go parent. Understandable. Human's got a human. But it is designed as a multidimensional experience from beginning to end. It's a bunch of activation. So I'm going to be saying a bunch of things, a bunch of words to your ego, but really me and a bunch of other spirits are also behind the scenes, or for some of you right in front of you. Going to be kind of like switching on some valves and doing some activations and just kind of getting you primed to start more actively remembering. Because my goal with these sorts of things in general is I would like to download as densely as possible so that you can run your own process as much as possible. And I'm here for support, and I offer, I was saying I'm here for support and I offer one-on-one sessions and all, but I would love for as many people as possible to be able to really open up their channeling rememberings this year. You know, like everyone who's here is absolutely ready to be stepping into this way of being much more concretely. So that's part of also why I'm running this first run of the class really, really discounted. So hopefully it's a little more accessible, and yeah. But I'm going to be doing different kinds of workshops, hopefully about monthly, probably at the end of each month. Next month will be on plant medicine. So yeah, if you're curious, you can follow the link in my bio and it'll take you to more information, and you can sign up on Eventbrite or whatnot. All right, well, I had to plug my phone in, but are there questions that are floating out there? Let's see, it looks like it just loaded a bunch more. Oh no, it didn't. Never mind. Is there anything out there that you guys are wondering about? This Lady Ruby. Okay, let's see. It really does have a lag, my goodness. Okay, here we go. Hook spell. Oops. Yes, sign up is through Linktree. Oh, I love this. The opening process is pretty amazing and far less scary than I feared at one time. Yeah. And that's, I appreciate you also just speaking that. I think the more of us that share those kinds of things, the better, because it can be a little intimidating at times. It just gets juicier and juicier as you go. It's so worth it. I'm glad that I'm offering some grounding, y'all. I love this, Rachel. The audacity of the current system is almost darkly funny. It is. I've decided to go full on with the humor, like, when possible. I recently was flipping through, it was like Upworthy or something, just like inspirational news, and it hit me that like everything I was reading was actually dystopian. It's like, what was like, neighborhood comes together to pay for some kid's cancer treatment. And I'm like, that's a sign things have gone really wrong, guys. And I just started laughing because this is where we're at. It's absurd. It's absurd. The things that are happening in reality around us. And they are a symptom of what's shifting and what's leaving, but it is horrific. A lot of new dimensional healers have a dark humor streak. I don't know if that applies to many of you, but I certainly have a really intense one. Build our own communities. Yes. This is so good. Braxton Cox. Can I phone in? Do you mean for the workshop? Yeah, because I think we're doing it through Zoom. I can double check, but it should be set up for you to be able to phone in. I don't know if you maybe also mean like one-on-one sessions, which are always over the phone. Meg, there is a book that I have not finished. I can't see it from here, the name of the author. It's really popular, How to Do Nothing. I don't know if you have delved into that. The vibe is good, and helped my ego sort of relax in a little bit more, like speaks ego language. Helped it relax in more to the value of letting go of this sort of working hard, grinding mindset. Because it is often also, I mean, in addition to the cultural pieces, there is just that like brain patterning, thought patternings. We're in the habit of thinking in a certain way and checking and like, yeah. mandatory schooling. That's a whole other thing I can't even get into right now. That's like days of things. Yes! Millennial here. I'm in the last months of a grind job and already feeling the energy of what's next. Yes! Full, bright, beautiful light ahead. I'm so excited for you. Or simply just be and move with the intention of love, and all shall flow. Yeah. When we're able to root in those energies, we're able to stay in our grounding and center, it is much easier to navigate whatever's flying around and whatever things we encounter. Yes, it is the Lady Ruby. She's been very bossy today. So yeah, that's why I keep saying, like, part of the practice this year is all of us staying in our own canoe. Stay in your canoe. Witness, but don't engage, right? It's the difference between compassion and empathy. Compassion, you're witnessing, you can hold space for it, but you're not in it. Empathy, you're feeling it. You're in it with them. You're empathizing and imagining what it's like to be in the mix instead of the sacred container that is outside. Can you expand on how the ego works and how sport works? So that spirit works and how we can be more aware of both. So I will start with my usual metaphor. That it's really a simile, but the soul self, you, and this is part of what I'm trying to bring into the conversation more and more. It's not that you are a part of your soul is a part of you, or you are a part of divinity. You are divinity. In a fractal, all parts contain the whole. This whole reality is built as a fractal. This reality, the adjacent realities, is just sort of like the nature of the being that we are, the one thing that we all are. And so you are all that is in a beamable form. And when I say beamable, I mean the film coming through into the reality, like the light of the projector coming through, and then the machinery that actually catches it and allows it to translate into the 3D world is this physical body and the ego structure. And they are connected. But neither one is its own creative force. The only thing that is creative in this reality is the soul, is divinity. So for those of us who have had a lot of conditioning, it's easier in the beginning to work with the ego as this separate thing. And what we're eventually coming to is the ability to integrate it into the larger soul self. And doing that is about clearing the conditioning, grounding, getting into that default grounded state, and building our awareness, expanding, including more and more. But you ultimately, such a teeny, teeny, tiny part of you is ego awareness. It has just been encouraged to be disproportionately large through our human experiences. So this is what's going to happen. She's just going to do this. When we're having our human experience and we're going through an awakening process, there comes a call to learn how to discern between the two, because that's the way that you drop into divine guidance and you allow that to be your everyday, every moment way of being. And so I like to go through a bit of a decision tree, and it becomes more instinctive, but it's essentially, is the information hold on, I'm a little distracted by repeatedly being whipped by this cat. Does the information I'm receiving feel castigating, disappointed in me, disciplinary, judgy? If it does, that's ego. If it doesn't, then I ask myself, okay, well, great. Then does this information feel particularly giddy or overly excited or attention seeking or some form of ego fluffing? Because that can get blended easily into what are true desires and wants. But sometimes there are these pieces that are actually the ego part of it. Okay, so both of those cases, no, it doesn't have those pieces. Great. If it does have those pieces, you're like, all right, well, let's parse those out. And this is where practicing discernment every day and every little thing helps you to much more quickly drop into your full discernment, your clear yes and no. Because you want to be able to notice, all right, there's something here that doesn't feel quite right. I haven't landed in my full body yes yet. What is the little thread here that isn't quite right? What's the ego-based piece? So for example, wanting to post something on Instagram, right? And there's the sort of straightforward, okay, I want to share this thing that I learned about healing. And then there's a way of doing it where you're feeding the ego a little bit, or you're doing something that's like, oh, this will be flashy or impressive. And we don't want to judge that. That's very human. Cool. That's happening. But that isn't necessarily what you want to go with as your guidance if your intention is to show up and emanate and post in your highest alignment, right? So it is actually aligned in that moment. You're feeling the call to post and share this information. Maybe there's someone out there who's due to receive it through the channel of you. But you want to be able to post it in a really clean way. You want to post only what is in alignment with Spirit's desires here. And so you parse out the part that's the ego. It's like, okay, I have picked up some extra kind of social media energy, or my childhood abandonment stuff did get triggered in that conversation yesterday, and I'm noticing I'm wanting a little validation. Acknowledge it, hold space for it, parse it out, okay? So now we've gotten to the place where we've decided, all right, there is some truth to this energy. We went ahead and removed the parts that weren't true or worked through them, transmuted. Now we know that this energy still has value. It is not judgy. It is not overly giddy. It has had its truth part pulled out and accentuated. That which you remain with after all of that is divine guidance. Those of you who will be in the workshop will get a decision tree printed out that has this whole process. Because though it sounds complicated right now, when you get into it, when you get into the practice of it, it happens like this, and you stop going through all of the steps. And it changes your life. That's not an overstatement. I'm not being dramatic. I do love a little drama. I am being extremely literal. It changes your life when you get that imprinted as the flow. Every single one of you has the awareness and intuitive ability to do discernment of what is and is not. It's just the conditioning and the lack of practice that has made that feel distant or confusing or continues to feed the insecurity. There are many of you who have the read and then you feel immediately like you must double guess it or double check or, oh, it can't be, or, and that's just conditioning. It's habit. For some of you, it's a little bit of witch wound. Divine unions. I don't love that it's happening. It's very validating, all of the people who are talking about being really drained today. I was talking with my dear friend who's helping me with my tech admin stuff. We were both just on the phone, just like, oh, the energy today. I just can barely like process and stay awake. I'm much more with it right now. I'm always better when the sun goes down. But yeah, it's one of those days. I felt it this morning. I haven't posted them, but like straight out of sleep, I recorded these 2 videos that are basically me ranting about physics and Planck length. I think that really speaks to just beginning. I was like, oh, this is the collective today. Okay. Hooksville. Yes, I forget when talking to the muggles that my dark humor can come off creepster. Yeah. Is there anything else Spirit thinks is critical for us to know? Well, the first answer is no. There's nothing that's critical. But there's something here. Get this standing. I'm trying to prop it with the cord coming out the butt. This is a wonderful time for dreaming into the full, really like surprisingly big versions of your dreams. A lot of people have been saying this, and sometimes it's almost like a stitched on a pillow cliche, but this is actually the time, like now to the beginning of March. Get in there. Don't hold yourself back. Don't deny what you really want and what you know you deserve and are aligned for and are slated for. It can't come into your reality until you're willing to name it, to call it in. There are a lot of you who feel kind of stuck in a holding pattern, but you're also not willing yet to take a moment, light a candle, speak what you want into reality. Write it down. Make it like a shopping list. Put an order in with Spirit. Talk to Spirit casually. Yeah, there's no wrong way to do it. Follow your intuition. Get in it. Get silly. You want to feel loose and open. You want to really tune in. Well, always first we start with grounding, but you really want to tune into that intimate connection with your own soul. I swear a lot when I talk to my own soul, not in an angry way, sometimes in an angry way, but more in a like, I don't know how to describe it, just like child of the 90s, listen to a lot of hip hop kind of way. And Spirit loves it. Loves it. Find your own way of intimately chatting with your own soul. Put your requests in, ask your questions. Be like, what the fuck were you thinking programming this into my design? And then leave space for the explanation. Or whatever your equivalent is. A wave of something just came through. It's like so bright, my eyes are like physically reacting. Okay, I think that's better. I've been having so many just like waves of download and such. I normally only have ear ringing like once every few weeks, and it's been happening almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And this eye clenching light blast thing has been happening a little bit too. Normally only happens in medicine space. Yes, exactly. Talking shit to the homie. $10:22 is 22:22. I have my clock set to 24-hour time, and it allows me so much more like angel number, repeated number, fun story time for myself. It's good for the brain too. Clearing conditioning. How do we do it? That is question of the year, isn't it? There are a lot of different ways. We all have our own ways. Generally, it's good to have a mix. So my personal mix has been working with a incredibly skilled somatic therapist who is also highly intuitive. So we do past life work and such in there. I don't think she does that with most of her clients. And then I have a channel who's very similar to me, actually, who I did a lot of my clearing work. I mean, that's really, that with the medicine work has been like the most potent. Just like get in there and get it done. Super efficient. You know, because with therapy, psychotherapy is very up here. Even with the like some of the energy work that I do with my therapist, and she's a Qigong master and all of that, it's still a much slower process to go ego first into the energy than to just like zero in on the energy, deal with it, leave the ego over here. I mean, the ego's integrated, but it's very different. So that was a really big piece from my path. And, you know, the work is ongoing. I talk to, you know, that particular teacher once a week. We have a standing appointment. And a lot of our time now, it functions more like a therapist supervisor. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but like a lot of therapists who are independent will have another therapist that they basically have, that they double check with and bounce ideas off with and kind of make sure that there's someone double checking them. So I do a lot of that with my teacher, and I call her my teacher. She would laugh at that if I actually did it to her face. She's like, we're colleagues and I helped you remember enough to get onto your own process. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. But there's still stuff that comes up, you know, here and there. I'll get triggered, or I'll get to a new level of work. And then it's like, oh, okay, like even with all of my skill, there are still some pieces, really deep foundational stuff, that it's hard to hold space for myself. And that's the thing that we often aren't thinking about when doing this work. We think about the modalities and how to approach it, but we don't think about the fact that all of this is some form of space holding. And it's good to think about, what are your needs, your ego needs, your traumatized parts? How do they need to be held to let go? We don't want to rip. We never want to force it. We don't fight with the ego, at least the way that I do the work. We don't fight with the ego. The ego is our ally. The ego has been trampled and traumatized. So we're not going to continue to beat it. We're not going to be like, I'm coming after you to kill you. You know, ego death is a myth. There's ego integration and ego trauma. There's one or the other. So when you want to drop conditioning, the very baseline is you want to start to drop into more awareness and energetic skill. All these practices that I'm ever talking about, very important to this. It will start that process on its own, just by doing the grounding and all of that. There's a lot of conditioning that can just melt away by you stepping into alignment. You don't even have to go find it. You don't have to release it and purge it. Simply by shining the light, it scatters the shadows. It's physics. Now for really deep things where you need someone to help you hold space, or if you're earlier in your process of dropping the conditioning and have a lot of it, as many new dimensional healers do, it's good to find a modality where this container is being held for you, to one extent or another, either always when you're doing deep work or in a regular cadence to support you in your own personal doing it. So grounding, rooting, centering, connecting with the energy. It might be remembering the memory, feeling the feeling. Then from that place, we invite it to move through the system. And that is actually the simplest part and is the hardest for me to just sort of explain right here quickly. That's what we are often working on for the first several sessions when I'm doing private work with people, is just learning that method of, okay, I do have this energetic body. I can just put my gaze on it and make it do things. You have to get the ego to even accept that. Because once it does, it flows like this. And you can be like, oh, there's that strand. Okay, melt. You know, but it's a learning, right? You're learning your anatomy. You're healing the anatomy as you're learning it, is one way to think of it. And so grounding, inviting it to go, and we don't force, we don't effort. It's a melting. It's an inviting and allowing. So all of you could practice this and see how it goes in your own time. Go into a quiet space, something that's been bothering you or a decision you're unclear about. Go into a quiet space. Ground yourself for about 5 minutes. Really land. The way you want to feel when you're really grounded is you want to feel a little bottom heavy. You know, it's that feeling kind of after you've had a lot of physical exercise or something, and then you've caught your breath and re-landed and hydrated, and it's just like all of the energy is flowing through your limbs. You know, you feel your whole body, everything's pumping and everything's alive, but balanced. And you feel not anxious, not up here. You're functioning, you're clear-minded, you know? But it's not all up here. You can feel your whole being, and it is attached, and gravity is pulling it to the earth. That's the state you want to start from. And then from there, you identify the energy and just hold the space for it to melt itself as you shine light on it. Like you're a beautiful, loving parent, just gazing at a child who just needs to cry it out and just needs to be held. And it will happen. It might take some time. You may cry and shake and all of that, but it will melt if you can stay with it and not judge it and just love it neutrally. And we always want to leave at least 10 to 30 seconds for something that has fully landed up here to drop all the way through the energetic body. That's the nutshell. Practice that and let me know how it goes. GFL, I want to offer you a reframe. You're saying, yes, my self-doubt, I'm holding myself back. I think you'll get further because I'm holding myself back actually is a judgment. It's a judgment of yourself, where you should be, where you are now, something that you're doing that isn't in your highest interest. So instead of judging, let's witness and love. And so perhaps instead of holding yourself back, you are still healing some of your fear conditioning. You're learning to let go. You're learning to expand. I like that one. That one resonates, Spirit saying that one. You're learning still to expand. Our egos cannot be self-destructive. They are not ever trying to hold themselves back. The only thing they are ever doing is trying to protect us and keep us safe. Just through conditioning, the way our egos understand to do that can be very twisty and counterproductive. But we're never actually trying to hold ourselves back or self-sabotage. That's not a thing. We're just trying to survive. And there's a gap for many people between what is actually happening in reality and what the ego is perceiving as reality. How do you ground before you get loose? So you can do both at the same time through dancing. Especially very intuitive, leg-centered dancing, various forms of tribal movement can be really great at grounding and centering and kind of throwing off some of the excess static that we pick up. It's very activating for the joints. It loosens the body. It lightens. It automatically raises the frequency after a few minutes if you're really in it and giving yourself fully to it. So, there's a lot of ascension symptoms floating around. It's real, guys. It's really happening right now. It's full on. I see some vertigo, some seasickness happening. It's right on schedule. How do we release entity attachment? So one of the things with entity attachment is that it's less common than people often think. A lot of times what feels like an entity is in fact really concentrated conditioning that we have built a story around. We're very quick to create stories of invasion or attachment or parasitic things. And so for true entities, I suggest having a professional do it unless you are already practiced in working with wobbly, extra-dimensional influences is how I would put it. Entities, which are just lower vibrational energies, right? Which for me also includes the fifth dimension. We sometimes think of the fifth dimension as this like magical, sparkling, ideal place. It is not. It is not. It's the next step from here. It is beautiful, magical, wonderful, and chaos. Like that place is the toddler room. Some of you have heard me call it that before. It's the toddler room. People are building things and smashing them and coming up with wild games and stripping off their clothes and painting their bodies and metaphorically speaking. It's a lot. And so fifth dimensional beings to me are more entities. They're not super high frequency, just pure light, have worked through most of their crap. So sometimes we're having experiences of those kinds of beings, and it can be disruptive to our systems and our flow, even if it isn't malicious. So if you feel that you are having issues with an entity, the first step is to talk to it. You are sovereign. You are absolutely alpha in that situation. Step into your grounding, your light, your God self, and be like, hey, what's up? What do you need? You can't stay here. This is a place of love, and I send you with love, but this is my domain, and I don't consent to you being here. Give them space to say what they want or not, and then expand your light out. Take up your entire domain. For me, that means my entire property, my lot, plus a little bit more on the edges and all the way around, up and down. That is my domain. Anything that happens in there, I physically feel in my body. So I'm really picky about who gets to stay. And so sometimes there's some beings that come through and they want to hang out, and I'm like, you got to go. And you just have to expand your light out and take up the whole bubble and then build the potency. It's not just expand out, it's really fill that bubble with you. And speak it. Energy is programmable. And for most, it's easiest to use the vibration of speech, to speak into it the intention. So then I will speak into this potent bubble of myself. Only energies that are invited, energies of the highest frequencies of healing and love and light, are able to be in this bubble, and everything else is lovingly repelled out. I'd forgotten to do it in a long time, and speaking through, I just did it right now, and I really feel the difference. I forget. But if there's like a real problem with entities, it is good to get a shamanic practitioner involved. Like if they're skitsy or you're having trouble rooting outside of fear and anxiety, it's good just to have support in that from someone with experience. Yeah. I hear you, Trisha. There's a lot of ear ringing. Yes, I can. Can you share about the 8th dimension? One of my closest friends is an 8th dimensional being, incarnate right now. So, 8D is an interesting place. And for those of you who are not as familiar with my work, when I use these numbers and terms and dimensions and all of that, it is for the sake of ease of conversation. It doesn't actually map very cleanly onto what reality is actually like out there. But for the sake of human understanding, this is what we're going with. So let's talk about 70 first. It's a good anchor point. There's this transition that happens at the 7th dimension. And from here, the 7th dimension is sort of like the heaven realm. It is a beautiful oneness. It is perfect nourishment. It's like, I think of it a little bit as an ongoing, perfect MDMA cuddle pile. It's just pure love, safety, cozy. Why would you ever want to leave? And you never have to pee, so it's great. But at a certain point, one gets bored of that. And often beings will choose to go on to the 8th dimension. It's not always linear. But those two are kind of like where we are in the 5th dimension. They feed into each other in a particular way. And the 8th dimension has very, very, very wise beings who have entered into like the next freshman experience. I'm trying to find the language because I'm seeing it visually and it's just going to be confusing to try and translate that geometry. But it's really the opportunity to start learning fresh, new, after a period of deep maturation, fruition, and then rest and regrouping. And so there is some world building that happens there. There is a lot of training and practice as teachers. There is playing with what we can call upper frequency worlds. Worlds here is not the most accurate. It's a very concrete 3D idea. But collectives that are incredibly complex. So down here where we are in nearby frequencies and nearby dimensions, there's a lot of focus on concrete worlds, world building, the internal world of this physical body, that sort of thing, planets, planetary systems. When you move into the 8th dimension, it's a different level of the meaning of worlds. It's all energy, and it is looking at what can that mean in a truly multi-dimensional sense, meaning engaging with many dimensions at once. Here we sometimes think of it as multidimensional as that which is outside of the 3D, 4D experience, or includes the 4D experience. Multidimensional, when you leave the human-centric perspective, gets much more complex. And in the 8th dimension, it's kind of an art practice, what's happening there. It's deeply spiritual, while melding into one thing, world building and art. But all of those terms are super human, and I can feel them being very human in your minds right now and don't quite capture what I'm trying to say, but it's good enough for now. Spirit's trying to get me to be okay with that. I can feel it. The Virgo struggle is real. Okay. So Fleur, you're saying no fear, just can't seem to get rid of it. Karmic entity. It has something that it wants to say to you then. There's something that's unfinished or that you're not receiving fully. It may be that there's been a partial transmission, but it's not clicking. Try that angle. And the light. Just don't leave space for it if you don't want it there. You could do a little ritual too to send it off in love, bubble it off and send it in love. This one does this energy. I'm going to call it more of an energy because it feels more of like it's like a really concrete echo. And that wants to be loved and healed into oblivion. Oh, that's beautiful, Spirit. Healed into oblivion, which is really just a beautiful way of saying integrated. If it's not working by pushing it out, bring it in. This is another thing some of you are ready to do. If something is disturbing, unwanted, disresonant, drown it in light, which is different than laying your sacred gaze on it, which is like a soft, loving parental thing. Drown it in light means you are the unshakable sun, right? Like just blinding light. You can like sear things. Be your full, bright self, ground, open that up. Imagine it if you don't fully feel it. And then drop whatever that energy is into the sea of your light. It's like taking one drop of poison and dropping it into the whole ocean. It becomes meaningless. Try that. All right, y'all. I am feeling ready to stop. I always end up here much longer than I expect. The time just flies. It's because I'm in like spirit flow. The timelessness of it all. Yeah, if you haven't checked out my workshop this weekend on New Dimension Channeling for Purpose and Play. That was the title Spirit chose. Please do follow the link in my bio. Check it out. See if it's for you. It's super discounted this time around. And for those of you who are already signed up, I'm really excited to see you on Saturday. And you'll have some other preparatory emails that are coming in the next couple days. So keep an eye out. It's all part of the unfolding. Yeah. Thanks for the roses. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for your presence. And I will see you all soon.